and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
The British government has announced a snap general election in July, and things are not looking good for the Conservatives, the ruling party in the UK. After almost 14 years in government, their approval ratings are at an all-time low. Polls strongly suggest that their opposition, the Labour Party, will win the upcoming general elections. During negotiations with the EU, Labour took a much softer approach to Brexit compared to the Conservatives, even supporting the idea of a second referendum. Considering how things are going, some wonder if a Labour government might ask the EU if it might renege on the whole Brexit thing. Could this happen though? And if it did, would the EU even want the UK back? At first glance, welcoming the UK back into the fold seems like a no-brainer. The UK is the world's 6th largest economy, has a population of over 65 million people, and is home to one, if not the continent's most productive city, London. The UK also boasts one of the largest and most powerful militaries in Europe. Amidst the ongoing war in Ukraine, the European Union faces significant security challenges, and incorporating the UK's military strength, including its nuclear arsenal, into the EU framework would greatly enhance deterrence capabilities and contribute to regional stability. Additionally, the UK is a well-developed and wealthy country that can significantly contribute to EU neighbourhood and development policies. The UK returning to the EU would also be a huge PR win. A country that democratically decides to leave, but then changes its opinion and democratically decides to rejoin, would demonstrate to the rest of the EU members, if it hasn't done so already, that going alone is very difficult in today's globalized and interconnected world. See what happens to your economy if you leave the Union, the EU could say to its member states, looking at a few countries in particular. But things aren't that simple. Even if the UK did want to rejoin, it might not be in the EU's best interest to let them back in. The last thing the EU wants is for the UK to rejoin and then leave again in a decade later. The EU needs to be convinced that Brexitism has been completely eradicated. This means there needs to be a national and political consensus in favor of EU membership. For example, opinion polls need to consistently show a 2/3 majority, and all major UK parties need to favor EU membership. There's simply no appetite from the EU side to reintroduce a troublesome member state. Critics also say that the UK took a Europe à la carte approach to the EU, meaning it would pick and choose which policies it wanted to follow. For example, the UK was given a special opt-out in regards to the Eurozone. It was allowed to keep its own currency, the pound, indefinitely. The same thing applied to the Schengen area. It is true that the UK, whilst a member, always preferred widening, meaning pro-enlargement to include Eastern Europe, over deepening, meaning the single currency and Schengen area. Some advocates for a federal Europe see Brexit as a good thing. Without the UK to veto potential laws, the gradual move towards a more integrated Europe can be sped up. For example, many believe that the coronavirus bailout, where member states agreed to jointly borrow 750 billion euros to respond to the pandemic, would never have been agreed if the UK were still a member. Why should we let the UK back in, they might say. All they do is drag their feet and hold us back. But this is just one side of the coin. How does the UK feel about potentially rejoining the EU? Well, the Lib Dems, currently the 4th largest party in the UK, pledged in their manifesto to rejoin the EU single market to save the NHS. This move would restore the free movement of goods, capital, and people between the UK and the EU. This story was widely covered by the media in the UK. However, depending on where you get your information from, you could have a very different perspective on it. This is where Ground News, today's video sponsor, really shines. Ground News is a really cool news app and website that gathers related articles from across the globe, showing political leaning, reliability, and ownership data for each source. The Independent, for example, known for its left-leaning stance, reports the story quite positively. In contrast, the right-leaning Daily Express headlines it differently, with Lib Dems' bombshell plot to overturn Brexit and get UK back to the single market, which is a different spin to the story as The Independent. I appreciate that I can easily see this in one place on Ground News. Right away, I see that 12 sources have covered this story, and that an equal amount lean left versus right. Ground News also shows us a factuality rating based on an analysis from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. Ground News cuts through the bias, helps you see your blind spots, and ensures you're informed from all perspectives. I find myself following news on the UK election and the European Union, to make sure that I'm getting the most balanced information. I encourage you to check them out at ground.news/EUMS. You can use my link in the description or scan this QR code and save 40% on the Vantage plan, giving you unlimited access to all of their features. Let's make this simple. We don't believe the UK will be rejoining the EU anytime soon. But the British public might start asking some uncomfortable questions of their government if things continue this way. During the 2019 general election, two parties took softer approaches to Brexit than the ruling Conservative Party at the time. Labour proposed a second referendum if they won a majority of seats, and the Liberal Democrats promised to overturn Brexit entirely and keep the UK in the EU. Both parties suffered heavy losses. Labour lost comprehensively to the Conservatives, and the Lib Dems leader lost her constituency in Scotland to the Scottish National Party. Brexit was far from the only reason why they underperformed, but the British public made their voice heard. They wanted Brexit done. Labour learned their lesson, and the leader of the party, Keir Starmer, has publicly stated that the UK will not be going back to the EU. So case closed, right? Well, not exactly. If we take a look at public opinion, we see that the approval rating of the EU in the UK has steadily climbed since Brexit. Check out this poll by WeThink. According to them, 48% of the population want to rejoin the EU, with 32% opposing it and 20% undecided. Were this to be a referendum on rejoining the EU, the yes vote would win with a very comfortable 61% margin. It's hard to say if this is just bitter Remainers making their voices heard, but there's no denying that the UK isn't anywhere near as keen on Brexit as it once was. Keir Starmer will most likely be Prime Minister soon. What are his options? While Labour has ruled out rejoining the EU, Starmer has said he will renegotiate the UK's deal with the EU to make it much better. He wants to build a closer trading relationship in 2025 when the deal comes under review. However, Labour has also clearly stated that there will be no customs union, no single market, and definitely no free movement. Therefore, the UK is unlikely to rejoin the EU in any capacity except for closer cooperation. But as public opinion for the EU continues to grow, the UK could gradually edge closer to the EU sphere of influence. Here's what we think. Let's say it did really happen and the UK applied to rejoin the EU. Should the EU let them back in? At EU Made Simple, we lean pro-EU, and we thought Brexit was a bad idea to start with. We believe the UK should only rejoin the EU if it's fully committed to the overall European project. This would mean as a full member state, it wouldn't have the same opt-outs as it did before. It would have to eventually adopt the euro and see itself as a fully fledged member of the continent, and drop the Europe à la carte approach entirely. If the UK isn't prepared for this, it should stay out of the EU. Not addressing the underlying reasons for Brexit just means we risk repeating the whole process all over again years down the line. But we want to hear your thoughts. Do you think the UK will ever want to rejoin the EU? Should they be allowed to? Even if they did? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like the video, and sign up to our Patreon if you want to support the channel further. See you in the next one.